Starting off on a fun note, I would love to hear
Okay.
more about one tweet. It was actually your first tweet, which I thought
My,
was the best first tweet. So,
my best first
reading
tweet.
reading sharpens the axe,
Mm,
action follows the tree,
mm-hmm.
consistency builds the house. Tell me a
That's
little bit
right.
more about that.
Well, this was something that was off the dome for me. And I thought, right, okay, I want to start with something that's really going to define who I am, right? What's my message? What do I like? I like reading. I like consistency. So yeah, what I did was basically just try and put my philosophy out there with the intention, right? I'm going to find other people that like what I like. So I do a lot of reading, and I'm a bit ashamed to say that my bookshelf is mostly empty because I'm mostly on Kindle these
Mm,
days. But I do have
yep.
a small bookshelf here, along with all my D&D stuff. But yeah, I love reading, and I've always got a book or a podcast on when I'm walking. So I do believe, like, and is that great scene from Game of Thrones, where Tyrion says, a mind needs books like a sword needs a whetstone.
Oh yeah.
And I really do believe that we have this glorious opportunity to speak directly or to learn directly from these amazing people.
Mhm.
And I'm very conscious that I never want to take that for granted.
Yeah, absolutely. And I also think being English speaking, even, like, that is a huge benefit in the modern world to be able to speak English, read English, know English. Like, it's huge. It's so much fun, too. So, what are some of your favorite, like, books or podcasts?
So, favorite book, 'cause that's a really good one. For me, at the moment, at least, because my favorite book of all time, nonfiction, is Think and Grow Rich. I've read that book
Of course.
couple of dozen times. It's amazing. I also love, again, podcasts. I usually have D&D podcasts, right?
Interesting.
Because well, I run D&D professionally, so it's kind of professional curiosity. But I love going onto YouTube, and I'll put like a Bob Proctor lecture on or a Myron Golden lecture on, and I'll just go for a walk.
Mm-hmm.
And that combination of just calming the body and teaching the mind, oh, I absolutely love it. But non-fiction, sorry, fiction-wise, it's got to be the Eisenhorn trilogy by Dan Abnett. I've
Really?
read that maybe 4 times, and Warhammer 40K is like my sweet spot. I love it. So absolutely in love with that.
That's
And
amazing.
I think Henry Cavill said it was one of his favorites as well. So I'm in at least good company.
Perfect. And so I'm actually, that's not on my questionnaire. I'm kind of going to be a little bit of a person who bounces around and have some fun here,
Yeah, let's
but
let's go for it.
I'm curious to hear about what you think about people reading more fiction.
Wow, that's interesting because I am primarily a fiction writer, in terms of the way I write. I, like I said, run D&D professionally, and that is for a large part of a game master's role is writing fiction. So descriptions and prose and the flow and the way words work together to create emotions, I think it's so important to know. And then I can bring that into writing professionally. And I will be honest, I have not written as much on Twitter as I should have, or X, apologies. I tend to do more videos because I'm just way more comfortable, way more expressive on video than I can be on text. But yesterday, I was in a space and I had the opportunity to just type away at something. So I did put out a little video, a little story yesterday. And I think that by by reading and writing so much fiction, I understand on that intrinsic level how the words should flow. And I'm not the best storyteller by any stretch of the imagination, but I have a good grasp on how things should sound because I've read a lot of good books.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. And so tying D&D into this, I didn't actually know you did that at all, which is fascinating. You were the second like grandmaster I've met and who like has a business around it, and I think it's the most fascinating thing. So tell me a little bit about how that has tied into you creating this secondary business on X around school and limiting beliefs.
Amazing. So yeah, with D&D, it is something I learned, well, I picked up 10 years ago. A bunch of my friends, because at the time I had just sort of started lifting and we were in powerlifting, right? Because my
Mm.
friends were like national champions for like strongman in Wales. And they said, "Hey, Will, you've got a good voice. Play D&D with us. You can be the dungeon master." And I was like, "What am I signing up for?" But sure, I love dragons. Why not? And so I actually dove straight in on the deep end, and it really became the lifeline for me when I went through a very dark time because during my late 20s and early 30s, I went through a massive period of like burnout in my work. I was in high pressure mortgage sales, and I loved the the selling, like the conversations, the one-on-ones, oh, peak. But I was losing the purpose for myself in the work. So I was letting my body go. I was letting my friend circle go almost. I was letting my that the higher self inside of me, I was silencing it for the metrics. I was chasing that number one. I was chasing those big commissions, and it really did kill me a little bit. And the one solace that I had was this creative outlet, which was D&D. And I got to tell stories, and I got to get together with my friends, and we told these amazing stories, which were, you know, 3 to 4 years long in one case every week. And I never wanted to let that go. But inevitably, as things happen, people move away, people have kids, and that circle eventually broke apart. But I wanted more of it. And over the years, I built up some skill. I was no longer terrible at it. So I thought, well, I can do this as a business. And I started running professional games late last year.
Oh wow.
And it was actually the first dollar I ever earned online. So I got a group of people together. They paid me $20 each, and I took them through a story. And at the end of it, the most amazing thing happened because I thought I'd done a mediocre job, but they just gave me the most incredible testimonials and feedback. And I was like, I might be onto something here. So I have been running that in the background for a little while. And then when it came this year, when I had, when my company was having downsizes and I got let go as a mortgage advisor, I thought to myself, right, what do I want to do with my life? I really want to take what I've learned because I've gone through kind of, I wouldn't say a spiritual awakening, nothing that dramatic, but I've gone through a shift, let's say, over the last year, physically and mentally, from where I was to where I am now, and I'm nowhere near where I want to be. But as part of that, right, the mindset and the spirituality side of things that I'd always pushed to one side, I always thought it was nonsense. I
Mhm.
really leaned into that very hard over the last year or two. And I've found through just like relentless curiosity about the subconscious that our beliefs are actually creating our behaviors and our reality to an extent. And I know people look at that and they say, well, how can that be? I will explain if you've got a second. So there's a mechanism in our brain called the psychocybernetic loop,
Mhm.
which states that our beliefs influence our uh, thoughts, feelings, actions, and results, which then reinforce the beliefs.
Mhm.
And when it comes to any sort of behavioral psychology change, you break the belief level, change the belief, and that reinforces then new behaviors. So this answered the question as to why I was self sabotaging so much for the last 10 years, digging myself into a hole and almost getting diabetes and a bunch of other nasty things I didn't want out of it. So I really deep dived into this
Mhm.
and combining the two, which was my love of storytelling, my love of teaching almost, and this topic really naturally fit in together. And earlier on today, I actually put my first advert out for my product, which is an accountability academy. So yeah, it is really just come full circle for me, and I finally found that thing that I want to spend the rest of my life doing. So long way to say that D&D was a gateway into something I never knew I needed.
Sweet. That is amazing. So that actually perfectly fits into kind of where I was going to go next. In your why video on your Twitter, something you talked about was how thoughts turn into reality. And so, what are some of the common negative I am statements that you hear, and how would you go about reprogramming those?
Question. So to understand the power of an I am statement, it almost requires just going right back to the very beginning of
Mm-hmm.
what are thoughts, you know? So an I am statement is so powerful because I am is what the Bible says the name of God is, right? And when you look at all the lessons, I am that I am, it's a definition of self. And we have this need to be congruent with the self image that we hold. So when you say, I am whatever it is, you are reinforcing that this is your identity and you will act in a way that is congruent with your identity. So when we look at business, we look at people who say, I just can't seem to. I can't seem to show up every day. I can't seem to stay consistent. I always, which is another one, right? I always do X, Y, and Z. The first step in breaking that process is to show the person, is that always true? Because if it's always true, that means it has to be true 100% of the time. And is that really the case? It almost never is. So then what I do is I'll say to somebody, right, okay, so you've told me what you're not. Tell me what you would want in its place. What is the opposite? And then we reinforce that as the new I am statement. So then they become aligned with the new behavior that they want. And then that reinforces the loop. So then they start to behave in that way. And of course, this takes repetition. It doesn't happen all at once. But one of the great things I learned about the psychology of behavior change is if you can get somebody to say, right, okay, I am now something aligned with what they want, and then go back and show them how they already have evidence. And this is wild, right? How they already have evidence locked up in their head that it's true. Because we have something in our brain called the reticular activation system, which literally will block from your conscious awareness information that doesn't line up with your self beliefs. You'll
Mm-hmm.
still record it in your subconscious mind, but it won't be accessible to you until you start to line up with the thoughts and the beliefs and the synaptic connections that are in line with it. So this is wild to me, and I absolutely love it. But that is how typically you can take someone from thinking something, for example, like I am not good enough, and then you can flip it and say, well, what would happen if you were good enough? Can you give me some thoughts and some experiences that you've had that show you that you were good enough? And all of a
Mm-hmm.
sudden we're reinforcing and compounding this new belief, which starts then to show through in the behavior, which influences the thoughts, feelings, actions, beliefs, results, and that reinforces the behavior. So it's a virtuous cycle. I absolutely love it.
Wow. Okay, I have two things on that. That was amazing.
Yeah.
First off, we are 10 minutes in and this has been super good already, so I'm loving this. With that being said, do you think a certain mindset has become more prominent in this century compared to other centuries?
Absolutely do. I absolutely do. And for two reasons. So we have at the moment, right, a golden opportunity. And like I mentioned with reading, I am always cognizant of the fact that we have been given such amazing gifts in the fact that we have all the knowledge of all humans ever on one of these, which we carry around in our pockets. So in centuries past, information was a tightly guarded secret.
Mm.
These days, we have the opposite problem. We don't have no information, we've got too much information. So I think that that is one major shift that people have gone through. It's not the fact that I can't do it because I can't get the information. It's the fact that I'll do it later. The information's always there.
Mm-hmm.
It's not important to get to right now. We have that distraction. So the first major difference that I see now, as to maybe even a decade or 2 decades ago, is this chronic distraction,
Mm-hmm.
this information overwhelm that was never present before. In previous centuries, we had different challenges, which were, a lack of these things. But now we have this a massive amount of overwhelm. The other thing that I really see as a new challenge for humanity is with the connection that we have in terms of social media, the gap in our potential has widened. And what I mean by that is a person now can pick up a mobile phone and they can watch a video, maybe from Danco, because that seems to be what people tell them to talk about. But they can see, it is possible for you, yes, you, to live at this level, £10,000 a month.
Mm-hmm.
In the 50s, people weren't thinking that. The majority of people weren't thinking that. They were thinking, okay, if I can get another 5% on my salary, I can get a new car. That's what their gap was. There was a smaller gap. These days, you've got people coming straight out of college. I mean, we've got like 15, 16-year-olds who are aiming at 100 grand a month. And like, that's a huge gap.
Mm-hmm.
So when we place ourselves here and we look all the way up here to where we want to be, we seem in relative facts, our self-worth is down here. And the goal we think we need to get to in order to feel good about ourselves is up here.
Mm-hmm.
So the gap is so much wider. And this is one of the reasons I believe that we have such a crippling depression rate. So what people will then do, rather than break down the steps they need to get there, is they'll feel overwhelmed and they'll distract themselves. And this is where companies, whether well-meaning or otherwise, capitalize on this with short-form content, with anything that takes attention, which is the new currency. So those are the two major challenges that I think we have in this century, even as opposed to maybe even 2 decades ago.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. So I actually have a couple things that popped up in my head while you were saying that. One that I really want to ask is, what do you believe? Let me think about how to say this. How do you go about navigating all of the information that is put in front of you?
Great question. So for me, I try and narrow my focus. So when I'm working on something, so let's say, for example, I'm working on how to craft a VSL, we'll say.
Mhm.
What I would then do is I would say, okay, I have got access to all the information there ever was or will be. Well, not will be, but all the information there ever was, right? And you know what? 9 times out of 10, I will say to myself, let me go into information gathering mode. I'll open up like 20 tabs on my computer, right? About all the great people on YouTube, like Pat Flynn, and all the great people that you can learn from. And then I will say, okay, I've got all the information I'm ever going to need to learn about this subject. Let's start narrowing it down. And I'll close maybe 10 of the tabs. So I'm working with the 10 that I really wanted to watch in the first place, you know? You always get that feeling you're going to miss out. So I narrow it down. And then I say to myself, okay, I've got, let's say, 4 hours to learn VSL and to get a minimum viable product put together. Let's start taking one of these things and trying it
Mhm.
because it's so easy to get into the loop of information hoarding, information gathering without actually trying it. One thing that I'm always super intentional about is okay, if I'm going to watch a video, I'm actually going to try doing it as I'm going along and then we'll move on to the next one. And I might need to come back to this a couple of times, but I find that one of those traps is just watching video and video and video and then thinking it's got to be perfect. I've got to understand this to a master's level degree before I even try. And that has never worked once in the history of the world. But it's the trap we all fall into. So I'm very intentional about that.
Right, absolutely. So, hopping off of that, that was another question I had. Was you just reached your 2 month anniversary on X,
That's right.
and you launched your offer. You already have your ad up and everything. You're doing it. So you took me a little bit through your studying process, but
Mm.
what has your research and learning process looked like to get you to where you are now in the last 2 months?
Interesting. Well, it's been a lot of sort of ready, fire, aim, if that makes sense.
Okay.
I've jumped in the deep end. So I started my school community about 6 weeks ago now, and I'd watched Andrew Kirby's videos on YouTube, and I thought, well, this is a way that I can use to actually gather a group of people because I tried doing this already in the past on Reddit and on
Mm.
Discord. And on those platforms, I feel people like to talk about the problem, but they're not that interested in the actual solution. And I tested this. So I put a poll up in Reddit. I think it was r/adulting, one of the Reddit posts for people, and I said to them, "How or what's the biggest challenge you face?" And 1,000 people commented. It was a huge post. It was the top post for like a week. I then went back and made another post and said, "Hey guys, you know all those things you told me about? I made a solution for you." I think I had like 3 comments. So that told me that the people who were there were more focused on the problem than the solution. So I said to myself, right, I don't want that. I want to attract people who are focused on the solution. So I started the School Academy and I made it one that you have to answer a few questions to join. And one of the questions is, what is your goal? What are you committed towards? So that was one thing I did. Now, in terms of the research, I watched the videos that Andrew puts up about how to create a school community. I have hoovered up most of Alex Hormozy's stuff while I've been at the gym. So he's been my training partner for a little while. And I've really started to understand community management because I think that's a big part of it. And when you are launching a community and, you know, for better or for worse, leading a community, you really have to understand what those people come to your community for. So a lot of the research I've been doing has been around the way to keep people motivated and engaged and actually interacting in a community. And it's been a challenge. I'm sort of learning as I go, but I probably pulled the trigger a little bit early on setting up the academy, but I'm glad I did because it's pushed me out of my comfort zone and forced me to learn a bit more.
Absolutely. And so, bouncing backwards a little bit, as you've gone to the school community and you've worked your way through X for the last 2 months, you mentioned in the last question I asked you about comparability and how we see ourselves as like two different levels. How do you go about comparability and like not letting someone who's gained 2,000 followers in a day get to you versus, we're down here taking our time, and how do you go about that?
I think that's down to awareness because it is the human condition to compare. And it's a very natural thing. Back when we were hunter gatherers, if you saw somebody that had more stuff than you, it was very likely they would survive and you wouldn't because they had the resources. So I understand from a evolutionary perspective, this is part of who we are. But we also understand in this day and age, that that doesn't serve us, because coveting what somebody else has got does nothing to help you. So what I try and remind myself is I don't know their journey. I don't know the path that that person is on. And even if I did, I couldn't replicate it because I'm not them. I'm me. And I actually try my very best, and I don't always succeed, to put myself in a position where I am happy for the other person, because I strongly believe that you get what you put out, you get what you are. You attract to you. I don't really like the wording of attract to you. You create the experience of that which you are. So if I put myself in a happy, congratulatory state, then I am far more likely to notice. And again, coming back to the way the brain works, I am far more likely to notice things that will help me achieve my goals. Whereas if I fall into the trap, which is easy to fall into, of comparing and saying, well, they're up here and I'm down here, my focus goes to I'm down here, that will help me reinforce things to keep me down here.
Hmm.
And that is what I'd like to avoid. So I try and stay in a congratulatory state of mind, because that's what I want for myself and for everybody.
Absolutely. That reminds me of the quote, paraphrasing. Why have a good day, or why have a bad day for no reason when you can have a good day for no reason? Like that mindset.
Exactly right. And it's all about focus, because the brain, the biological aspect of this, is your brain is a goal-seeking machine,
Hmm.
and what you place your focus on determines what you will look for. And I think about it in the terms of your brain just says yes. It just says yes. So when you look at someone and think, oh, I'll never be where they are, yes, correct. You'll never be where they are, correct. Whereas you say, right, that's inspiring. I'd like to be there. I'm glad they got there. How would it feel to be there? Yes, yes, you can be there. Yes, it'll feel great when you are there. So it's always saying yes. It doesn't have the ability to say no. So you've just got to think, like, where am I shining my spotlight of attention? Because that's where I'm going.
Hmm. Interesting. Yeah, absolutely. I love that concept. I've been reading Indistractable. I don't know if you've ever heard of it. Wonderful book. And he kind of goes along the lines of like, ironically, he wrote a book also on how to easily create habits through like softwares and everything too. That was his first book he wrote, and now he's creating another one to like help you work through not getting addicted to apps.
Yeah.
Really, really ironic, I think. But he goes into detail on how time management is pain management and how the human brain is naturally made to be distracted. And it is, I absolutely love his writing style and the way he goes about it. And so I'm really curious how you navigate like the distractions of like, oh, well, I don't really want to research right now. Maybe I'll just read a book, or I don't want to write right now, so I'm going to Google something. How do you check yourself back into like, no, just write?
I'm always refining. So I manage my days on Google Calendar. I have everything set up there. So at the same time every day, because I train 7 days a week, I will go to the gym at 12:30 every day. So I know that I have from 6 a.m. when I get up to 12:30 to get my stuff done.
Mm-hmm.
And then after that, I know that I'll eat and I'll be tired and I'll be sluggish, and I might make a video because they're easy to make. But deep work for the day, the gap, that the window I have is kind of between 7 and 12, because I have to walk the dogs in the morning. But for me, then, what I need to do is I will do what Earl Nightingale suggested, which is simply to write out a list the night before.
Mm-hmm.
I think this has become generic advice, but for good reason. So I'll write out the tasks I need to do. So, for example, tomorrow I'm editing a podcast, I'm publishing, and I've got to get that all done before 12 o'clock. So I know then that I need to split my time into chunks, and I work with time blocking. So I'll give myself a maximum of an hour, then I'll take a small break, and then I'll do another hour, and I'll do as many of those hours as I think I'll need to get the task done.
Mm-hmm.
And then when it comes to the end of the day, I'll review my day and I'll think, right, well, what did I get done on my list? And because I've systematized my day pretty well, so I eat at the same time, I walk at the same time, I'm very boring in that way. I have my system set up, and I usually sleep at the same time. Um, I find it quite simple to know how many blocks of time I'll have free. So I do leave large portions of the day open for
Mm-hmm.
calls and meetings and things that come up, but my mornings are blocked out for the most part, where I've got all the things I need to get done. And then by the time I get back from the gym, I've got the afternoon, the evening free to take as it comes. So there's a bit of, it's a concept which Hormozy calls, I think it's management time versus creation time. And it's basically that. So it's like I create in the morning, that time is mine. the afternoon I'll take care of everything else.
Yep. Manage versus maker. Yep.
Yeah, that's the one.
I love that.
So the morning is my maker time, the afternoon is my manager time.
Absolutely. So, regarding time blocking and everything along those lines, do you time block the night before or like a week in advance?
Typically, I'll do it for the week. Yeah. So when I'm looking at the calendar, I work from Sunday to Saturday. So on a Sunday, I'll look at the calendar and I'll say, right, what are the big tasks I need to get done this week? So I'll do it now. I'll go to Google Calendar and I will see how many people I need to speak to that week. And usually when I set my goals for the week, I'll then work backwards. So if I know that I want to get, for example, uh, 2 modules in my coursework done. I know I want to get X, Y, and Z done. I'll put those in first. So I know I've got the needle movers in there. And then I'll start filling in around that with other stuff that needs to get done.
Absolutely. Okay. And so, bouncing off of that, you systemize your days. Obviously, you say it's boring, which I makes me giggle because I love boring days. But do you think humans are animals of routine?
I think we can be. The human, if we take the human as an animal, right? We're motivated by the same things as other animals, which is food, shelter, and all the good stuff that comes with that. So I think the human body works best with a routine. We've got certain spikes in our hormones like ghrelin and leptin and things like that, which happens on our food cycles. We've got our circadian rhythm on a sleep cycle, and that leads me to believe that we're probably designed to do roughly the same thing every day. In a primal state when we are chasing for food, things will never go to plan. We can't say, "Oh, sorry, food, I can't eat you today. I'm on a fast." If you're out and about, you're going to do what it takes. But I think that the human animal works very well with routine.
Interesting. I like that. Love that. So you say when I said animal, you kept clarifying animal.
Mm.
Further clarify that for me. Why do you believe there's a discrepancy, or like I know primal versus animal, but how do you look at a human?
Yeah, so I mean, I'm looking at a human from a biological perspective when I
Mm-hmm.
say that. So, what we have as humans, which no other animal has that we know of, are the higher faculties, the imagination, the will, the perception, reason, and all that. So, using those things, you could logically say to somebody, okay, I want you to block out your week, but leave, Tuesday afternoon free for this special activity. Whereas if you're a biological animal, if you're an animal out in the wild, you're not going to understand what Tuesday means. So you're going to say, right, my body does not expect me to go without food this one day because I know that I need to, reduce my calories, and that's the easiest way to do it.
Right.
So from the primal state, the animal state, I think that we are very, very good at routine, but then we do have the ability to interrupt those patterns logically because we understand it's going to give us a greater gain in the future. And I distinguish that from an animal because that's not typically animal-like behavior. That's more of an intellectual behavior.
Okay, I love that. Bouncing a little bit off of that, in regards to routine, do you think routines also can be downfalls?
Yeah, big time. I mean, if we're not intentional about it, we could become a slave to it just as much as we can anything else. It's very easy to find your routine as almost like a prison.
Mm-hmm.
You could say, as an example, I've got a barbecue coming up on the weekend, and I'm a very strict carnivore, so I'll bring my own food and I'll bring my sparkling water, and they'll all be there with their beers. That's fine. That's a choice. But if I said to them, "Hey guys, look, I work out at 12:30 till 2:30 every day. I can't be there," you know, that's going to be a prison. That's going to be something because I really want to go and see my friends. So all I'll do is I'll say, right, this one time I'll move my workout earlier in the day. So I think any workout has to have an element of flexibility. Sorry, any workout, any routine has to have an element of flexibility to it to allow you to be able to actually live the life that you want to live. Because otherwise, all you've done is you've built yourself a very well organized prison. And that is not the way to live because it should be a scaffolding that supports your life,
Mm-hmm.
not bars that cage you in, is the way I look at it.
Okay, beautiful. And so, theoretical question: if someone is
Sure.
struggling to build a routine, how would you help them to guide them to start creating a routine? Of course, you can't start scheduling your whole day, but how would you go about it with them?
Yeah, absolutely. And this is very relevant to exactly what I'm doing these days. So, yeah, major thing we would do, right? The first thing I would ask anyone who starts working with me is, what are your big tasks? What needs to get done every day? And there's a wonderful analogy of this you might have seen in a video where the university professor starts asking people how much stuff they can fit in a jar. And he says to them, right, he gives them a bunch of rocks, a bunch of like sand, and a bunch of ping pong balls, I think it is. And he says, how can you get this all in here? And you start with the big things. You start with the big needle moving tasks. So when I'm looking at somebody's calendar and they tell me, hey, well, look, I'm all over the place. I can't seem to get everything filled in. I say, take a breath. What needs to be done every day? What are your needle movers? So I'll start with those and we'll block out time for those. So we'll put in, for example, 2 hours here, 2 hours there. And oftentimes people have what I call roadblocks. So commitments they just can't shift. Usually things like work and school and kids, things that are important. So we'll find a block of space and we'll put the needle moving tasks. And then around that, we'll start to do the non-essential, but things that are urgent. And then, of course, like the quadrants that I love, we'll look at the essential but not urgent as well. And then the non-essential, non-urgent, that's the first to go if we don't have enough room for everything. So I would say to everyone that if you can organize your day to do the same thing in the same place at the same time, you're going to get optimal results. But it's 95% as effective to just get those blocked in the calendar and get the needle moving tasks done. And that'll move you closer to where you want to be.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Love that. And so, kind of bouncing, not opposite to that, but you mentioned quadrants. For those who don't know, explain that a little bit deeper.
Yeah, so no worries. So there's a model that is used for decision making where you've got urgent and you've got essentially impactful or necessary. And I'm going to forget the terminology here, but the way to look at it is if you've got something that is a high urgency task, so it needs to be done now, and it's a high impact task, you drop everything else and you do that because that's going to be the most important, the most impactful. If you've got something that's impactful but is not urgent, so this is your needle moving tasks. This is like you've got to do sales calls, but you don't need to do them right now. Whereas you might have an urgent task, so you might have an urgent task which is not really a needle mover, but it's something that needs to come up right now. You need to go pay a bill. You need to go pick up something from a store. It's about how you prioritize these things. And then, of course, on the other side, you've got the non-urgent, non-impactful, which is where most of the mundane tasks end up going. And the way to do this is that you prioritize it based on what is going to move you closer to your goals. So the way I like to look at this with my work is my workouts are essential. I'm on a bit of a weight loss journey throughout the last couple of years, and I need to keep that momentum going. I can't skip a day. So they're always urgent. Sorry, they're always impactful, but they're never that urgent. So I have them in at 1 o'clock, 12:30 till 2, and I can move it around if I need to. It's not urgent. But if something comes into me, someone says, look, Will, I need you right now. Help me get out of this situation. That is going to be something that's not going to be that impactful to me. It's impactful to them, but it's urgent. So I've got to deal with it. So I will move the non-urgent, impactful task to make way for the other one. But the danger is you must keep in mind that it's the impact that it's going to get you towards your goals, not the urgency.
Okay.
So you've got to have the discipline to understand, right? I'm saying no to the urgent thing to say yes to the impactful thing. And that's how I typically make decisions.
Okay. Sorry, I should have told you to like bring a graph or something to give
Yeah,
your brain a visual
I can
reference.
I'm all right at improvising.
um, kind of backpedaling a little bit. Do you think there's a lack of seeking personal excellence currently?
I absolutely do. And I think that this is one of those things that when we look at the world as a whole,
Mm.
the capacity of the individual has never been greater.
Right.
Like you and I have never had the ability to do as well with the time we have than we have right now. With the automation services that we have, with the amazing ability to learn anything on command, essentially, our capacity for excellence has never been greater. But if you look at the average person, they are dumber, sicker, and broker than ever before.
Yeah. Yep.
And this is coming down to, I mean, yeah, it's profitable for the people who sell the services to keep people dumb, sick, and broke, sure. But I think people get lost in this elaborately constructed dopamine trap. So they go to work, and to relax from work, they do things that sap their energy, keeping them in a lower state so that they can never really get out of that. So it's almost like a spider's web, and you're trapped in it, but you don't really realize it. You need to have that, I think, outside perspective, or an FTE, if you know what that is, to get out of there and then start climbing up. Because I do believe that everyone has access now for free or with very low cost to the materials they need to achieve a much higher level.
Absolutely. And so, what would be the first thing you would recommend to someone who knows they're in that spider web but doesn't quite know the first step to get out? What would you take for that first step?
Mm. So the first thing that I would look at is how they're spending their. I think we'd probably look at it in what's more urgent. If you're in a position of your body is giving out on you, like I was, I had chronic hypertension. My heart was ready to blow up. Daily migraines, massive amounts of excess body fat. The first thing to do is make the initial corrections. Start making those small gaps. But I think when someone's life is, as Ryan Emerson would put it, a dumpster fire, the main thing we need to look at is clarity around the goal.
Mm-hmm.
Where do you want to be? Because there's a great old saying, right? Is if you don't know where you're going, any map will take you there, or any road will take you there. First thing is clarity. Get clear on the goal. If you know that you're not happy where you are, that's a good thing because it's giving you clarity on where you do want to go. If you know you're not happy over here, you can see more clearly that you will be happy over here. So for me, I wasn't happy being overweight. I knew I'd be happier being underweight, being in a healthy weight. So for me, the clarity was, Will, you need to lose weight. It's got to the point where it's a problem. Get on that now. I was clear. And that is, I think, the first step is to get clarity. From there, you can start going through your day. And I like to do this with people because I'm objective, because people will typically defend what they're doing from that place of being in their comfort zone.
Mm-hmm.
Because the mind, the brain will simply, it'll make justifications. One of the great things I love is talking about paradigms. And a paradigm is the mix of beliefs and behaviors and habits that we have that control our habitual behavior, and 95% of our behavior is habitual, and it also controls your logic. So this is why having an external helper is so powerful, because they can objectively go through your day and say, well, you tell me you want to be rich, you tell me you want to be healthy, this subscription you've got to like Domino's Pizza, how is that helping you achieve that? But the person who's doing it, they don't see that as a problem because it's not in their scope, um, it's not in their spotlight, as I like to say.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the next thing I do. So we get clear on the person's objectives. We then look at the day. How are you using your time to get you closer or further away from this? And I tell people, you might hate me as we go through this process. I'm going to do some things that you're not going to like, but I guarantee you it's going to get you to the outcome you want to get to. So that's what I would help people with, is basically showing them, okay, this is where you want to go. These steps aren't helping you get there. So let's eliminate them as best we can and replace them with habits that will get you to where you want to go.
Mm-hmm. So, what are some of the misconceptions you've seen with goal setting?
So a lot of people view goal setting like resolution setting.
Okay.
So they'll say, right, okay, because there's a trap that we can fall into when it comes to goal setting, which is I'm going to say I'm going to do something. And I'm going to say it so loud on all the social media platforms that it's going to give me the feeling of validation. Look how great I am because I'm going to lose weight. And then the person doesn't do anything because they got the reward that they wanted. They got the attention. So a lot of the misconceptions are that the actual setting of the goal itself is what gets you there, when that is the first step, but it doesn't actually make a change. It doesn't actually make a needle change. What I find it much more impactful is the decision to make the change. So I don't believe so much in goals as making clear decisions. When you make a decision to change, what you're saying is, I am cutting off all other avenues. This is what I am making as my primary focus.
Mm-hmm.
And then from that point, that's where the real change starts to happen. Because when you make the decision and you start then compounding on it with the beliefs and the behaviors, you start doing the work. As James Clear says, you start casting votes for the person you want to be by the actions you take. That's really where the momentum starts to build, and that's where the behavior starts to change, and that goes back to the loop we were talking about earlier. So I think a good goal session is, we sit down, we work out exactly where you want to be. But if you don't make the decision that you're actually going to get there, that time was basically wasted.
Absolutely, absolutely. And so, you are very adamant about doing like public journaling, like your day 1, day 2, day 3.
Mm.
You've made the decision, but
Hmm.
would you recommend that action for other people who are maybe new to that decision of habitualizing things?
I think that doing it in public is it's going to become more popular with certain people. Now, I was raised in we'll say a negative way, just for to keep it PG-13. I was raised in a way where I had to be the very, very best because I was the eldest of four children, and I was the son of a military person. So my dad
Okay.
was a career military, and I was almost the squatty of the house. You know, I had to lead the way. I had to show them how it was done. So for me, I am very comfortable through that, putting myself in uncomfortable situations to to make myself grow. This is kind of like how I've approached business and X is like I'm just going to go for it and I know it's going to be uncomfortable because that's how I grow. But the majority of people needs softer steps.
Mm-hmm.
So what I would say to someone, and this comes back to an amazing study that I referenced in my video today, if you say you're going to do something, you are 10% likely to do it.
Okay.
And so you've basically got a 10% chance. So one in 10 people who say, you know what, I'm going to do that, they actually go ahead and do it. And I looked at the stats for the video, and this is lined up with New Year's resolutions, where about 88% of people fail after 2 weeks. So it's unlikely, we'll say, that if you just say you're going to do something, that you're actually going to do it. You need to make the decision and commit. And about one in every 10 people can do that on their own. The stats change though when you start bringing in other people. When you've got two people that promise each other they're going to do something, that rate of success goes from 10% to 65%.
Mm.
Huge, huge difference because you're relying on someone else. And this is where like gym partners come in. I was on a call with a PT just before this, a personal trainer, and they were saying, people use a PT not necessarily just for the technical side of things, but the accountability side of things is huge. And the stats get even wilder when you start looking at public and ongoing checking in with another person, public accountability, essentially what I do. The stats go from 10% to 95%. And this was done, I get the name of this university, but it was basically an American study where they looked into the likelihood of a person achieving their goal with this accountability.
Mm.
And it doesn't need to be public, but you need to have a feeling of you're doing it, somebody else is relying on you. That feeling actually will encourage someone when they don't feel personally like they want to do the thing. The pain of not doing it is less than the pain of letting the other person down. And humans hate pain, so they'll do the least painful thing, which is doing the thing they wanted to do. And this is really the problem I decided to solve with my business. Because, like I said, I sat down and I thought, well, what problems can I solve? What is the biggest problem that new solopreneurs or people who are going through this consumer to create a mindset are going to face? And it's the fact that 90% of them give up and they never get the dream they want. So that's the biggest problem I can try and solve. So yeah, I would say that everyone can benefit from this. One in every 10 people isn't going to need it. I'm one of those crazy people. but but for the average person who doesn't have the disposition to just commit to things and go all in and be almost dogmatic about it, then that additional external accountability can help shore up that gap and help them actually achieve their goal.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you believe someone can cultivate that disposition to be able to just force themselves into
Absolutely.
it?
Absolutely. And the way to do that is just repeatedly expose yourselves to repeatedly expose yourselves to situations that you don't want to do. And this is why you hear a lot of the gurus, I say gurus, a lot of the YouTubers who talk about self-development, talk about the power of cold showers. And I thought this was crazy, right? But there is something magical about it where you stand in the shower and you hate the fact that you're going to do this to yourself. But you look at the tap and you think this is going to suck. And then you do it and then you feel amazing.
Mm.
Doing that, like breaking that loop, because what you're doing is you're actually going against your biology. Your biology, your brain, your mind is thinking, don't do this. This is unsafe. This is going to spike your cortisol. This is going to cause you all manner of biological problems. Your heart rate's going to elevate. Your body's going to contract. And it does. But then your mind, that higher part, understands what you're doing. Your body doesn't, your mind does. So you're fighting against yourself. And winning that battle is an experience point, leveling up your discipline.
Hmm.
So yeah, anyone can cultivate it, but how many people are willing to take that step?
Right. Absolutely. And so we're gonna pivot a little bit here. I know you're an Alex
Mm.
Hormozy. You said he was like your Jesus, which
He's certainly had an impact, and he's got a very nice beard. So yeah.
wonderful beard. There was one podcast where he was talking about how he was like the hillbilly of
Yeah.
businessmen, and I was like, I love it. He's amazing. But what do you believe about like seasons?
How do you mean?
So like Alex Hormozy's season of no, Alex Hormozy's
Mhm.
season of work, or seasons of management, seasons of making. Do you
Mm.
have seasons, or would you recommend seasons for anyone?
That's an interesting question. I haven't really thought about it. I think for me, we are always evolving. So I know Alex says when men or women, he speaks specifically to men as one, when men are young and they have all the energy, they should work as hard as they can
Mm.
because they're setting up for future seasons or future phases of their life. And the more they plant now, the better the harvest later. And I think there is a lot of truth to that. But I think it's also important that people realize that we only ever have the present moment. And if we always defer happiness to the future, and there is a very strong case for delayed gratification, and I strongly believe in that. But I also believe that you should allow yourself to experience the feeling at least that you want right now. So I don't believe in burning yourself out for the sake of future happiness. I believe there is a very good balance to be found in understanding and cultivating the need to delay gratification with the knowledge that you are doing this for the right reasons, and that gives you the fulfillment now. So you put the money away, you put the money in investments saying, yeah, I would love to go to Disneyland today, but this is going to buy me two Disneylands later. That's very different to burning the midnight oil and putting your body into a physically deprived state just to get that extra little bit of work done. So that's where I define the balance.
Hmm.
Take care of yourself in the now, look after the assets, but be prepared to delay gratification for things that you think you want to later because you can accomplish much more doing that.
Hmm.
So yeah, an interesting question.
Yeah, I love the answer. So that actually reminds me of the book that I'm currently reading that I mentioned earlier,
Mm,
Indistractable. The way he goes about breaking distractions, there's four steps. Step one is recognizing. Step two is writing it down. Step three is sitting with it, and step four is
mm,
surfing the wave. And so in surfing the wave, it's a 10-minute rule where it's like, okay, I don't want to read right now, so I'm gonna go play video games. Okay, you have to wait 10 minutes, and you just sit
mm,
in that uncomfortable surfing the wave. And so that really reminds me of like, give yourself 10 minutes.
mm.
Cool. You want to go to Disneyland? Buy the tickets in 10 minutes. Guarantee in 10 minutes, you're probably not gonna want to go to Disneyland.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
So that's one that's really helped me recently because I'm a big video gamer, and it's
yeah.
yeah.
Well, I love video games. Like I say, I wouldn't say well, I was clinically probably addicted to them. I used to play World of Warcraft all the time.
Oh my goodness.
Man, I had many characters at maximum level in World of Warcraft. I was looking. I think one of my early tweets was just I looked at my PlayStation and it was like showing me the hours you'd played certain games. And I think Destiny One, I'd almost had 1,000 hours in Destiny
Yeah.
One. And yeah, it's a bit of a wake up call, when you realize like where did the time go? And this is where like that opportunity cost comes in. How could I have better spent that time? I love playing with my friends, don't get me wrong, but this is the kind of thing I should be deferring for later.
Yep.
That now, that is time spent. That is not time invested.
Yep.
And I'm a big fan in, spending a little bit of time, sure, but invest the majority of your time in better activities for later. So, yeah, I love video games. I still, because I used to stream video games, I still like video games, but they are very much a backbone. I don't have time for them these days. Although my wife is going to start her own gaming channel and she's going to drag me in, I'm sure. So I might end up doing some, but it'll be for business.
It'll be for business. Absolutely. That is hilarious that you say that. I recently looked at all of my hours. My microphone's cutting out there a little bit. I recently looked at all of my hours, and it made me mortified how much
Mm,
time I've spent on I have an Xbox. I've started on like a cube, like a actual gaming console that was terrible, and now I have a like next level PC, and it's just like looking at all of it. I was like, oh, that's such
Uh,
like a oh.
well, I used to justify this because I would have two monitors back in the day, and I would have World of Warcraft on one, and I would have a Bob Proctor lecture on the other, thinking, I'm actually making progress here.
That is
Kidding myself.
hilarious. I actually have two monitors, and I totally used to do the same thing. Like
Mm.
throw up like I'm in Gutsy or Alex on the other screen. And I'm like, oh, this is the best. No.
I suppose it's better than not having that on and just gaming, but yeah, I think I love I appreciate video games for what they are, but I think as long as you're intentional about the use,
Mm.
then you can use it as a reward. Because what I have said to my wife, because she's a very big PlayStation gamer, she's into trophy hunting, and she's basically she wants to become a YouTuber for this as well, and she's friends with a lot of the big YouTubers who do the trophy hunting. So fair enough. But what I try and do these days with video games, and I don't manage to do it very often, is I'll try and use them to reward an otherwise unrewarding task.
Mm.
So when I have something that I need to do, like cleaning the house, and you could say that having a clean house is a reward in and of itself, and you'd probably be right, but it doesn't feel that way. So I'll say, right, if I clean the house, top to bottom, I'll allow myself an hour of video games. And I think they're great for that because it's an immediate reward. You get to sit down and relax with something that is immediate, it's tangible, it's giving you that physical sensation of being rewarded for something that otherwise would not give you that. So I think in that way they can be really useful.
Absolutely. And kind of bouncing off of that, when I first started X, I realized all of this time I had wasted on video games. And
Mm-hmm.
wasted is a very big word to use for that. And so I can't remember who I was talking to about it, but I think it was Reese Mulby. I have a podcast with him. He's amazing. He's also my age. He spent a lot of time playing video games, things along those lines.
Mm-hmm.
And we kind of sat down and we were like, okay, but what do we learn from him? Like, what skills do we have from certain video games? So, like, he was very into, like, PvE and very, like,
Mm-hmm.
single player, like, grindy, consistent. You have to log on at the same time every day to get this reward, like that kind of stuff. Versus I was more team player. I've played like professional R6. I've played like all of that kind of stuff where I was in a league and I always had a team. And so I was like, okay, like I'm a team player. I like to
Mm-hmm.
collaborate. Versus he likes to be a single player and show up at the same time every day. And so it's
Yeah.
kind of fun to reframe it as like, oh, I didn't waste the time. I just found out I was really good at
Mm.
these skills versus these skills.
Yeah, that's a very healthy way of reframing it. Because, well, again, I think that teaches you a lot about who you are or who you could be, because
Right.
you can always choose to pivot. But yeah, I love that. And out of interest, Rainbow Six Siege?
Yeah.
Nice.
Very toxic, but I've been playing for the better part of 6 years.
Wow. I
Yeah.
remember I got it for Christmas, like whenever it came out for Christmas. And I remember I played it and I actually did get the platinum trophy on it for Rainbow Six. But yeah, it got like so crazy online that I was like, I gotta step away from this.
Yeah. No, it was definitely rough, especially being a woman in the space. It is a
Mm,
very hard space to be in as a woman.
yeah.
But I actually met this last weekend, I actually met one of the first people I ever met on the game in person for the first time.
Oh wow.
Yeah, so it was a lot of fun to be like, oh, you are real.
Not just a face. Yeah, absolutely. And there's something special because, like, we had back in the day, this is going real back in the day now. We had World of Warcraft when it first came out.
Mhm.
I had a Halo 2 group that I was playing with because we had a Swansea League where I live, and we were the champions for the local area. Right? There's four of us. And this was back before even TeamSpeak was the thing. So we'd have Halo on the console with the headset on, playing World of Warcraft. And eventually, when we all met up, I think it was in Comic Con or something like that. We all actually met up as a group together. It was just amazing to finally put the face to the voice.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, it's a great experience. And so, kind of as we wrap this up a little bit, if there was one question I could have asked you, what would it have been, and how would you have answered it?
Ooh, that is a very good question. I guess let's have a think here. So we talked about the mind. We talked about accountability. I think the other element, the other pillar that makes me who I am is the spiritual side.
Mhm.
So I grew up as a Christian. And my parents, well, my dad was an army person, so he wasn't very religious, but my mother was a very religious Jehovah's Witness, so like very into that. And I grew up going to their meetings every Sunday, which was basically church. And I bounced off that very hard as soon as I was able to, because that really wasn't for me. Put a anxious 8-year-old and a 10-year-old in a suit and make him stand there on a Sunday, and he's not going to like that. So for the longest time, I stepped away from it, and I was a staunch atheist, like all of my 20s, all of my late 20s, early 30s. And it was only when I was about 32, 33 when I actually started to study, and this came from Think and Grow Rich, right? Where he actually said, there is a divine power, there's a higher power. And I kept hearing this, and I was like, okay. And then I started to study Joseph Murphy, who was about the subconscious mind, and he started talking about God all the time. I was like, okay. Neville Goddard, Earl Nightingale, Bob Proctor, all down the line, all of these tremendously successful business people,
Mm-hmm.
all of them had a spiritual side. So I started, okay, there's got to be something to this. So I looked at it objectively, and that led me into the spiritual side of self-care. So as I was losing weight, I got into meditation, I got into sort of breath work, and then I got into visualization, and then I started to get into a guy called Edward Art, who interprets a lot of Neville Goddard stuff. And that led me to a profound understanding of like where we actually are, physical beings with whatever you want to call it, some form of spiritual connection. And like that is something that I'm still learning. I haven't got it worked out, but I believe that the world is too perfect to be random chance. And this is going back to Warner von Braun, right? The guy who came up with the space program. He said the universal rules are so precise, they're so precise, they had to be set by someone.
Oh, absolutely.
And I still want to figure out who that someone is. It's probably still us. We're probably, the way I believe it is, we're all connected to that in some way, form, or another. I don't pretend to be an expert. I didn't take a class in cleric, but I do strongly believe that there is much more to be found there, and it's well worth the time to develop ourselves in line with that, because I have found a deep inner peace that comes with understanding that one day I won't be here, and I want to just make sure that I spend the time I do have here really serving the best that I can, because it's fun to get the toys. It's fun to get all the money. It's fun to get the status, although I don't even care about that these days. But the real thing that gives you that feeling of fulfillment on the inside is service. It's helping other people, because, and I think they've actually studied this, right? The thing that gives you the greatest level of satisfaction is giving a gift to somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
There's probably a reason for that. So that is something that I'm interested in studying more of. So those are the pillars that make me up who I am. So
Absolutely.
we've got consistency, discipline, and spirituality. But yeah, what a great question to finish up on.
Yeah, absolutely. Kind of. I don't want to stop there. There's a little more I'd like to say, but
Yeah.
I like that you say whatever you want to call it. Something I really believe in is like I've read the Quran, I've read the
Mm,
Bible, I've read King
mm,
George's Bible, and I've read the New Testament Bible, which is I don't like it, but
mm,
um, I think they all have the same principle, which
mm,
is genuinely just like you said, love.
mm.
It kind
Yeah,
of just comes down to give a gift to someone. That is an act of love and providing for someone.
yeah.
And so,
And the underlying factor is because, like, I believe when people say, the name of God or source or the force, because Star Wars was deeper than we thought, conspiracy. But yeah, when people call it whatever they want to call it, I just call it I am, because that's what Neville called it, and I really resonate with that, because it's the feeling of I am. And one of the things I love that he says is you can take away everything from a person. You can take away who they are. You can take away where they are. You can take away their memories, but you can never take away that feeling of I am, that presence, that oneness, that I am here. Um, and I've tried, I've tried, like, see, it's an experiment. You can try. You try and think of nothing, and you'll always find that you're still there. You're still observing nothing. You can't take you out of the equation. You can't imagine not existing. That's the only thing you can't imagine. Um, so knowing that, it just opens me up to so many other questions. So I like to say, if you want to call it God, you call it God. If you want to call it the Force, if you want to call it this great big spaghetti monster in the sky, you call it that if it makes you feel good. I call it I am, and I believe that that is what we all truly are. We're all connected to that, and there's science to this. I don't know all of it, but there's the conscious mind, the subconscious, and the infinite, the superconscious. And although our conscious mind can't directly influence the superconscious, the subconscious does pick it up. And this is how
Mm.
one person can have a thought and somebody else can pick up on it. They can have the intuition to call somebody because we're all connected that way. Again, science might disprove this one day, but until they do, I'm pretty convinced.
Reminds me a lot of Rick Rubin's book, if you've ever read
I,
it.
I don't know if I have. What
You
is it
need
called?
to read it. Rick Rubin's The Creative Act. He also recorded the audiobook in like with his voice. 10 out of 10 recommend. I also just love Rick Rubin's voice though. So,
Wow, I will add it to my list. So
yes.
Rick Rubin, The Creative Act.
Yes, absolutely
Fantastic.
amazing book. Big producer and everything, and he just goes along the lines of like, if you want to be creative, you need to be able to access that creative touch, which is sixth sense, your infinite intelligence, things along those lines. They're
Mm.
all the same concept, that infinite, that higher level. And he's
Yeah.
like, the none of the creations we make or ideas we have are our own. Everyone
Mm.
can get the idea. It's who acts on it first that
Yeah,
creates
I've
it.
heard that I've heard that from somewhere else. Well, I went back to Think and Grow Rich recently on spaces, right? This is kind of like how I started in spaces, was reading through that chapter a week. And infinite intelligence is what Napoleon Hill calls it. He says there is a power greater than us. And in the Bible, it actually says, I can of mine own self do nothing. It is the Father within me that acts.
Mm.
Same kind of thing. And again, I this isn't commonly done, but I don't view the Bible as a history book. I view it as a book of instruction of how to use the mind.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you look at it and the various characters within it, this came from Neville, right? He suggested that each of the characters was a state of consciousness. You could be in the state of David or the state of the Pharaoh or whatever it was. And I love this. And this made sense because, like, I always rebelled against the idea that 2,000 years ago people could do magic and we can't do it today. That there was a guy that could go out there and cast fish jutsu or whatever it was to make a million fish, and that obviously that's not true. Like, physically, on a physics basis, you can say that's not true, but it's true in the mind. It's true in imagination. And would it not make more sense that things like resurrecting somebody in your mind, bringing them to mind, resurrecting them, would make more sense than physically bringing someone back from the dead? That makes way more sense to me, that he's talking in allegory rather than history. And it just breaks a lot of the beliefs that a lot of people have around religion. And again, it's never a popular thing to bring up because people cling a lot to this. And I don't blame them, because it provides a lot of certainty in a world full of uncertainty.
Mm-hmm.
And bless my mum, before she died, she was very much into religion, again, right up until the time she died. And you would never want to take that away from someone because it makes them so happy. It really reinforces their identity. And what I've found is religious people are genuinely really nice people because they believe in something about being nice to other people. So this is a personal thing, but it's really something that I've come to understand more in the last couple of years.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I love the little rant we just went on there. That was perfect. But to wrap up, if you had to give one belief to the entire world, what would it be and why?
If I had to give people one belief, it is you are capable of absolutely anything. And I don't just want to be generic and say you can do it. I want to say what you put your attention on, you will do more of.
Mm-hmm.
So, what I would say, pick something that you want. Understand that your brain, if you can imagine it, you can get there. It is scientifically proven that what you put your attention on, you will find a way to do. You are going to go off track sometimes. There will be things in your way, but understand that if you walk towards what you want with full faith that you're going to get there, you will draw on other resources that you didn't think you had, and you will find a way. That is a belief I hold as one of my foundations. I never used to have it. I have it now. I built it over the last couple of years, and you can build it too.
I love that. Best way to leave it. Thank you so much, Will, for hopping on today. This was
You're
awesome.
very welcome. It was great to meet you. And yeah, looking forward to speaking to you again sometime.
Absolutely.